Welcome to the Thought Leader Podcast. Get ready to hear powerful stories, unique perspectives, and bright ideas to impact the world in the areas of health, wealth, and relationships. We interview experts, authors, executives, entrepreneurs, and other industry thought leaders who share new strategies, practical tools, and best practices to accelerate your personal and professional results. This is the Thought Leader Podcast. And now, here's your host, Elayna Fernández.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Thought Leader Podcast. I am joined today by an amazing expert. She is absolutely inspiring, and the information that she has to share is really and truly innovative, and I think it's life-saving too, because we have Hatty McCafferty today, and she's going to talk about real menopause talk. That's also the name of her podcast, by the way. So, Hattie, I just want to know, like how you started this journey. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, first of all, what an introduction. Thank you. I'm sort of already sweating now out of gratitude and honor and a tiny bit panicked. I now have to live up to that. But thank you very much for such an introduction. And it is lovely to see you. So thank you again.
Thank you for being with us.
It's a pleasure. How did it all start is a good question. There are kind of lots of strings and avenues. I was and still am a practicing personal trainer, and the majority of my clients are midlife women. And I would chat to them when they're training, which is already a positive thing, just as a heads up. So strength training, very good thing to be doing in midlife. And one of them was a good friend and would be very open with me about how she was feeling. And often she would refer to menopause. And at that point in time, I knew about it, but all I really knew was that your periods stop. And she was experiencing a lot more than this and had regular migraines. She had joint aches. She was tired, like real fatigue on a daily basis. And yes, she's a working mom of 3, but we are all familiar with fatigue. And then there is that challenge to get up the stairs. That's next level fatigue. So we would discuss it. And then the pandemic hit, and I had a little bit more time on my hands originally. Of course, then online happened to everybody and things got busy. But I started to research it more and found this wonderful woman called Jenny Burrell, who runs educational courses on peri to post menopause. So I started studying under her, and I am still learning. She and her colleagues have so much wisdom to share. And so I was able to discuss this with my clients, and certainly with this particular friend. And we realized that most people don't really know what is happening to them when they start experiencing symptoms like this. And it's so easy, particularly in midlife, when quite often you have children, younger children, even teenagers, who can definitely be as challenging, just in a different way from toddlers. Maybe you also have parents to care for as well. Work presents different challenges. Life is packed. So it's very easy to put it down to stress. And some of that will feed in, most definitely. But the more I learned, the more I realized that actually it was all part of perimenopause, menopause, and often post-menopause as well. And again, the terms, lots of people don't even know what they are. Yeah. So a few months later, I was going on a weekend with some girlfriends, and we were all in the car together, chatting away, as you do, and started to discuss how our mothers had indoctrinated us, I suppose, with ways that we should behave as women. And Sophie, my friend, said that her mother-in-law came to her just before she got married, and she said, "You must maintain feminine mystery at all costs."
Wow.
And actually, this really fed into some of my background as well, certainly on my father's side. You must have a separate cupboard for feminine products, which basically meant hide your tampons. And even your toothpaste and toothbrush, don't clean your teeth in front of your husband. So building women up to be this ethereal, almost magical being, which doesn't really leave much space for the reality of life.
Mm-hmm.
So menopause wasn't spoken about, periods weren't spoken about, bodily functions, even the housework, it had to be done almost with a wand. And then we decided that actually we needed to talk about this and share this with whoever wanted to listen. And from that, really, the podcast was born. Now, 100 episodes in, and I've had the honor and privilege to speak to doctors, pharmacists, authors, personal trainers, graphic designers, professors, teachers, all realm of wonderful women, all about their experience.
Amazing. Oh my goodness. I am still a little bit in shock from that feminine mystery bit. But I really love that. And especially because you do have a background on in TV. So it's really fitting for you to now be spreading the word through your own channel. And it's an award-winning podcast, I believe.
It is. Thank you very much. But again, I can't attribute that to me. Every time I started up, every time I walk into a space like this, I am with all the women I have learnt from and continue to learn from. So it's really down to them sharing their stories with me, which is a huge privilege, being allowed to tell other people's experiences and their wisdom and share that with others, and to feel them here, because we all want the same thing, which is basically good healthcare for women and good self-care for women and others, which is the broader conversation, of course. So we all want that together. So we're here as a collective force.
Yes, well, thank you for being here. And thank you also for being inclusive and supporting all genders. That's really, really key. I really appreciate that. So let's talk about this topic, which is still taboo. Like you said, menopause is still a taboo topic, but you also say that it's a buzzword. And so why do we need to talk about it? And why is it a hot taboo topic?
It's such a good question. And I feel there are two parts to answer that. So first of all, why do we need to talk about it? Women or female born, because yes, inclusivity is so important. And I'm very wary of using that word because I come from the privilege as a privileged background as a white woman. So I have it a lot easier than many. Also cisgender, heterosexual, therefore I fit into the, I don't have the challenges that many other people do. So it's not really my place to say I'm including. So I would just like to open it up to whoever wants to be included. I am very fortunate in that I have 2 interviews coming up, one from a mum of a transgender boy, although again, transgender, he was born that way. So he, in my mind, transcends gender. And she's a beautiful woman, amazing, can't wait to talk to her. And also a trans man who, again, his soul is just... We met on Instagram and decided to chat. And it was just because he radiates this incredible beauty and joy. My guess is because he is being him from the deepest, truest part of him. And so we're going to talk about that. I don't feel qualified to talk about menopause in the trans community yet. I wish to learn more. And of course, if anyone wants to listen, then that's fantastic. And anyone wants to talk to me, that's great too. Very long way of starting that. But why do we need to talk about it? So those of us who are female born, are 51% of the population. And I spoke to a man recently who said, "Oh, I understand you talk about menopause. That's great. I've got a young daughter. She's 4. I hope she never gets to that." And I had to stop him gently and say, actually, you do. It's just a life phase. It's part of the transition, the life cycle that we go through as women, just as many of us, most of us, and I'm going to go to averages because it is easier and broader, start periods around, I know it's as early sometimes as 9 years old now, but around 9 to maybe 13 years old is the average starting point. And then the average age for perimenopause, so the run up to menopause, which can be 8 to 12 years, is 44. Average for menopause is 51. So, and yes, essentially, if you're going to zoom it down into a one sentence, that is when your periods stop. It's so much more, which is why we need to talk about it. So I gently explained to him in a little bit more of a concise way that actually he does want his daughter to reach menopause because it is just part of life. So we need to talk about it so people know what it is. We need to educate the generation coming up behind us so that they can prepare themselves, look after themselves, be aware of what's going to happen, because it doesn't have to be bad. I think that is also why it's a hot topic, because it makes headlines. We've had shortages of hormone replacement therapy in the UK. I believe that might have been the same in the US, certainly for a period of time, and in certain parts of Europe. It makes for a good headline. And women suffering, yes, it happens. Yes, it needs to be addressed. Absolutely. It makes for a good headline. How to breeze through this life phase doesn't make for an interesting news piece. And certainly doesn't grab somebody's attention. Yeah, I'm doing fine. I had a rubbish couple of weeks. It's like, oh, okay, so whatever. But we do need to educate everybody around us on what it is, why people might be suffering, how to support them. And this includes every human. This isn't limited to those who will experience it firsthand, because we all know somebody who will. If we have a sister, a daughter, a wife, a neighbor, a colleague, a friend, somebody we know will go through it, and maybe they will need support. And another reason why it might be a hot topic is that there is money to be made from, because by 2030, there will be 1.2 billion of us in this life phase. And so the less discerning people might jump on a bandwagon and create something. It could be a pill, a cream, some magical potion that will solve all of these problems. There are discerning, good, genuine businesses who have this opportunity to serve a population who require serving. And quite often at this life stage, again, we have independent financial ability. We know what we want. And a big change, if you Google menopausal woman and go to images, it's a sad place to be.
Oh my goodness.
Drab and grey and faded. The women look miserable. And that is the opposite of all my guests from the podcast, all the women I've met, my cohort, who are dynamic and powerful and intelligent and ambitious. So we need representing in a realistic and current way. So there is opportunity as long as we are discerning as customers.
Wow, this is so eye-opening. And there are so many little pieces that you share there that are so enlightening. Of course, you have traveled all over the world and you have lived in Europe and the Caribbean. So when you speak about this, you have a cultural wholesomeness about it, especially with the ages, because as a Latina woman myself, born female, I experienced, this everyone really starting their menstrual cycle very, very early. And, having lived in a slum, I also saw pregnancy at an early age. So just having this broad awareness that you bring to the table is so key to this conversation. But I really love the statistic that you shared, but also how the media really changes reality and how we are taking ownership to have those conversations, to educate ourselves with the people around us. So rather than reading the scary headlines and looking at the scary images, having the whole picture when we talk to others. I really love that piece as well. So I'm learning so much from you already. And I haven't asked you all of the things that I want to ask you, but I'm just so grateful that, that this exists, that you're a certified menopause consultant. And I didn't even know that existed before, which is really, really incredible. And so as someone who is an expert in this field, how do you explain, that people think about hot flashes and being old and being irrelevant with menopause or perimenopause? And how do you get people to listen to you or to get the conversation started, since these conversations are so key?
There are many varying tactics, but I think it just comes down to being open and honest about it. And the more a person provides a space, for want of a better word, where others feel comfortable to ask you questions, nothing is off the table. Then once the curiosity is sparked, then they begin to open up. And if they feel they're in an arena where they can ask those questions safely and not be judged, then they can listen and discover and learn as well. And of course, you are a beautiful Latina woman. One thing that everybody also needs to recognize is the cultural differences and the background differences. So Black, Asian, Latina women, and the list goes on, often, not always, but often experience perimenopause 1 to 4 years earlier than their white counterparts.
Mm.
And there are many potential reasons for this. Also, childhood background and upbringing. Any childhood adversity can also have an effect and bring menopause forward a little bit earlier.
Yeah.
I think the easiest way, often in a group, in a seminar, certainly because I walk into organizations and give seminars and workshops and talks on menopause, is to show them a graph. Lots of people respond very well to visuals. And so I will very regularly show them a picture of just the 3 basic sex hormones, progesterone, estrogen, and testosterone for a woman throughout their cycle. And if we're going to go on to very neat and tidy averages, 28 days, it goes up and down and up and down. The first half, the luteal phase, the hormones rise gently and then they fall gently after ovulation into the follicular phase. It looks to me like a bit of a roller coaster anyway, and this is normal and this is what we have to go through. Then you reach perimenopause and you look at the graph and it's just as though people have thrown dots and lines all over the place. And this rises and this drops and it's erratic and it's all over the place. There is absolutely no rhyme or reason. And then postmenopause gradually declines and settles into what is touted as this glorious place of stability. I'm not there yet. I'm looking forward to it. So when people see that illustrated and they see that this is what we deal with normally, and then we go into a sort of Jackson Pollock painting phase, then they understand more that, oh, that's bound to have a few challenges. If that is what your body is doing, and it's normal, this is to be expected. This is a transitional phase. When people see things visually, they begin to grasp it a little bit more. And then explaining what the symptoms are. And I believe there are now 72, maybe even more recognized symptoms.
Wow.
They range so vastly from itchy skin to tinnitus, sleep disturbances, dry eyes, sore mouth, burning mouth. I mean, I could go on and on and on, but then they can reach levels of critical anxiety and depression. So some might be irritants, some can be genuinely fearful. And I've had a few women come to me thinking they were genuinely dying. So it isn't something to be brushed under the carpet. But I also feel that the medical aspect, whilst essential for the care of severe symptoms and women in general, it often overlooks something deeper that is going on in menopause, which is more the transition into the next phase of life. Because if this does happen aged 50, 55, we've still got maybe 2/3 of our life to live. It's not the end. There is plenty more to come. So I also think we can learn a lot from, say, China and Japan, where they view this as the second spring, which I think is a beautiful phrase. And is it all wonderful? No. There are days that are genuinely challenging, but as with most of life. But can it be? Yes, I think it can. So less of the negative and more of embracing lifestyle habits that can support us, workplace habits that can allow us to thrive because we are a valuable commodity in the workplace, and more positive attitude because we've got so much more to come and so much more to give.
Oh, I love that. Oh my goodness. And this is enlightening, especially the Jackson Pollock painting, because I'm very visual, so I could totally see that. And I know that a lot of people don't know the symptoms, and the amount of symptoms that you mentioned, now I want to know all of them. But before we touch on that, I know that you went to the doctor and they told you you were too young to be experiencing that. So is it that doctors don't even know the symptoms? What is going on?
It very much is. And when I was told I was too young, I was 46, which is the bang on average age to be in perimenopause. But quite often GPs will do a blood test if they get that far. And a blood test is just a snapshot of that moment in time. So maybe your bloods will come back completely normal and exactly where they should be. However, half an hour later, this is how intense perimenopause can be. They could be through the floor. So it's very difficult to gauge. But essentially, it goes all the way back to the education of doctors. And this is across the world, certainly US and UK. Doctors just aren't educated on it. I think some of them have had 4 hours within their 7-year, whilst they're training to become doctors. 4 hours is sometimes spent on menopause. Some not even that. It's not been recognized. So it's not their fault that they don't know.
Yeah.
And we need to change that. And certainly we're working very hard towards it in the UK to change education. We also need to educate children and ourselves so that we can do the right things. So yes, it comes down to education for everybody.
I love that because the more I hear you, the more curious I get, the more I know what I don't know. And the more I think, this is what she's talking about when she says we need to take back our body, charge of our body and our mind. And I want to, circle back to when you were talking about the workplace, because I now see that there needs to be education in the workplace. But I know that one of your articles mentions that there's a cost to menopause. What is the cost of menopause in the workplace?
You've been listening to the Thought Leader Podcast. At Thought Leader, We help experts, authors, executives, and entrepreneurs land the most credible and authority-building stages in the world to spread their message and their impact. If that's you, visit thought-leader.com and click on Schedule a Session to get started. Now back to this episode of the Thought Leader Podcast.
I had to write down notes on this because, yes, one of the symptoms of perimenopause, and I am fully in the trenches of it, and most of the time it's great. Then there might be a couple of weeks ago, had very, very stressful situation and everything came flooding back. So stress management is key at number one. I had to write notes so I didn't forget, because there are some key statistics. And obviously workplaces range widely from emergency services to corporate banking, advertising, something more creative in the theatre, for example. But either way, menopausal staff are valuable. They have experience, whether it's in that particular role or not. They have life experience and creativity and still ambition that needs to be fulfilled. So as far as the costs are concerned, in 2021, there was a survey that showed over 90% of women felt that menopause symptoms were having a negative impact on their work, but they were too afraid to tell anyone, even a doctor, never mind somebody in a managerial position. 3 of the most bothersome symptoms are hot flashes, at work anyway, hot flashes, brain fog, and fatigue. And then if you add insomnia on top of that, everyone knows how it feels to have a bad night's sleep, never mind a week or even a month. That can feed into brain fog in itself. And if you're walking into a meeting and an established, let's say, in a managerial role, and words fall out of your head, sometimes you're able to laugh it off. And certainly in my little realm of menopause, it's so normal. We can all play charades for aeroplane or avocado or whatever the word is that has been forgotten. But if you forget your colleague's name, or you've prepared an important presentation, many women feel like an idiot. They feel like a fool. They feel like a failure, and it is debilitating. So that then creates anxiety. Anxiety can then increase. With anxiety can come depression. It can build and build and build without the right support. Over half of the career women that have been in this particular survey as well, it was about 55%, said that perimenopause made them feel invisible and dispensable. And if they're experiencing these particular symptoms as well, then a tendency to feel as though somebody could do it better is perfectly normal. But this is perception. Often at this point, these women are reaching the peak of their career. So the idea that they then feel as though they should move along is really heartbreaking. Across the UK alone, it's estimated that 14 million days a year are lost to menopause symptoms. But again, that's a guess, because women are too scared to report them. There isn't really an official manner in which you can report them, and some people don't even know what's happening to them. So they'll just be experiencing debilitating migraines 48 hours after 48 hours after 48 hours, and they roll, and they don't even realize that it's based on menopause. And then my final statistic is that it can cost up to 325% of a woman's salary to replace her. If she's that senior, she's been established, she's earning handsome money, you have the recruitment consultant, you have to find somebody else, you have to look after her. So again, it builds and builds and builds. And that's just the financial cost. Never mind morale to the rest of the team, morale to the woman who is leaving her job or moving on. There is a positive side in that some women do take the time and they take it off from work because of their symptoms and then decide to reboot themselves in a completely different way, which is how actually many of the genuine businesses that support perimenopausal women and menopausal women have begun in the first place. So they're run by women, often for women, to support them through this phase so that nobody else has to suffer in the same way that they do.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. It's so eye-opening. I can't even find any other words to describe this. I'm learning so much. I'm like taking it all in, and I'm sure that our audience is so grateful that you're here sharing these statistics and this information and education with us. Thank you for all the work you do and how you're really breaking these cycles of stigma that are around. Like when you said many of them don't report it because they don't want people to know about this. That is just, beyond, because I know when you said they don't even know what's going on, that definitely needs to change. But even as we know what's going on, then society has the stigma that is not helping us beyond our education. So I really, really appreciate that you're bringing awareness to this. And I know that you are doing work already, helping kind of make menopause attractive. And you're working with global organizations. You mentioned all the workshops that you do, the leaders that you work with, just you're everywhere, not only at an individual level, but also at a corporate level. And so how does this work, and what does this mean? And how do men respond when you bring these topics to male-dominated places and spaces?
Well, thank you for your kind words, first of all, and thank you for asking about the men and how they respond to how you alluded earlier to me working in TV, and I did for I don't even know how long, 10, 15 years in TV and film as a producer. So often on set, and as the producer, I had some input as to who would work on set and always wanted to include as much of a variety of people as possible. But very often it is a male-dominated set, on floor, camera, electricians, and so forth. So I'm used to being in that environment and just getting on with everybody, and they just treat me as one of the boys, I suppose, for a very old-fashioned phrase. So I actually really enjoy doing the male-only workshops because, again, wanting to be inclusive, when men in particular are, do you know what, it's not in particular, it works across all sectors. When men are in a room where they feel that they're all on the same level. So if women don't know what's happening to them, and I was one of them, then how on earth are they supposed to know what's happening to us? And when you put them all together and you've just got me going, right, okay, what do you want to know? Basically, I'll give them the outlines of what the situation is, start sort of breaking the ice, asking them questions. It's very easy to refer back to puberty because we've all been through that. And this is just as much of a roller coaster. It just happens 40-ish years later. And they respond really well because they feel that finally they've got an arena where they can ask questions and not feel foolish. Their next door neighbor, the person 5 rows back, is in the same situation. And then the more they learn, the more they kind of sit up straight and the more empowered they feel, because they then feel like they've got that upper hand and they can understand. So, and I love this about lots of men, a broad brushstroke, they quite like to fix things. And certainly my husband is very keen on fixing things. He would never do that to me or our daughters. He knows we're not there to be fixed, but he likes to support and understand. And so when he does, if he's got the tools to just sort of slip something in place that might be useful, then he does. And whether that's at work or at home, I think for all men to get involved, that's really powerful. Often it is the men whose wives are going through a really tough time who start asking the first questions. So they will say, look, my wife, she doesn't want me to touch her. She's tired all the time. She's uncomfortable in her own skin. She feels that she's gained weight. I don't mind. I don't care. It's, this is her body. She just feels uncomfortable. What do I do? And the answer is often, well, you don't need to do anything, but talk to her. Ask her how she's feeling. Very gentle questions. It's not, what are you doing about this? Or but how are you? How are you feeling? Is there anything I can do that will make you feel better? Can I get you a glass of water? Just the simplest, most unintrusive things to start off with. So they love it, and they get to have a good old almost gossip between themselves, not in a negative way, but in a good sort of, oh yes, let's have a good chat about something juicy, because that's quite rare for them. And then of course the women open up and share stories, and just knowing you're not alone makes the world of difference. Like, oh my goodness, but we sit 2 seats apart from each other every day. I didn't know you felt like this. Me too. Let's go and have a coffee on Saturday or after work or whatever it is. And so they build better bonds, and very often it ends up in creating a menopause hub, which is one of the most successful things, whether, again, it's in the emergency services or an insurance company, advertising agency, so that there are groups that can get together just who have shared experience. They don't even have to talk about menopause. They can just be together knowing that the person sitting next to them knows exactly how they feel.
Wow, that's so powerful. And I love there's kind of a thread going on here that talks about non-judgment. So providing that non-judgmental response, and also that safe space to speak. And that kind of, like you said, you're not alone. This is not abnormal. And I love the common thread that you're sharing from all of these conversations that actually make change and that make a difference. And I'm surprised that the men are so relieved. That is so amazing. And so if there's a man out there who wants to actually start that conversation, how might he do that?
Depends who he wants to have the conversation with. If it is with colleagues, again, is it with his fellow male colleagues, or is it with
maybe with a woman in his life, maybe at work or at home?
First of all, I would suggest that he educate himself as much as he possibly can. There are some great articles out there. There's a handful of very credible, genuine people who certainly on Instagram, who break it down in a very digestible manner. You don't have to be an expert. You don't have to understand all the hormonal fluctuations or the hypothalamus's role in the pituitary gland and the adrenal glands and the all you have to do is understand the very, very basics. So what is perimenopause? What is menopause? And the symptoms. And then you can work outwards from there. Once you have some knowledge, then the easiest way to break a conversation would be, oh, do you know what? I read something really interesting the other day about sleep disturbances in midlife, particularly for women. I had no idea that you could have night sweats that soak the sheets, have hot flashes in the night as well as in the day. Do you know anything about this? Or can you tell me anything about this? Or I wonder what else there is to know. And either it will fall and just open up a door and bring on conversation. Or it may, because it could be out of the blue, it could just lay a seed. And the woman might respond, oh, yes, I've heard of that. And do you know what? Sometimes I get that when I'm really exhausted or really stressed. Or they might go, oh, how interesting, and turn away because perhaps they're just not ready to discuss it. Particularly if you're in an open office, it all depends on the relationship you have with that person. But there are ways just to sort of put down breadcrumbs so that people can follow them when they're ready. And the same in a general office environment. It also depends who this man is, because if perhaps he's an 18-year-old boy who is new to the environment and the woman is, perhaps 50, then maybe he should just tread with caution, because maybe she is at a point where she wants to keep her life private. I've been in situations where I've been asked what I do. I tell people I'm a menopause consultant. I have a menopause podcast. We discuss all kinds, and women have turned around 180 degrees and walked in the opposite direction because they're just not ready to discuss it. So I have to respect their privacy, their choice to keep themselves private as well. I'm happy to bang on about it all day long to whoever will listen. But that's the point as well. It's to whoever wants to listen and whoever wants to share.
Yeah, that is so powerful. And these techniques are just, I told you, life-saving, and also money-saving, as you said, because of the just implications that they have at work. And one thing that I want to know is, when you're in the trenches of perimenopause, what would you say that your top advice is for younger women that are not in this age bracket that we're talking about, which I'm there just to identify myself. So younger than 40s, maybe even teens.
My one piece of advice universally would be track your cycle. And there are apps, take your pick, Flow, Balance. There are hundreds of apps out there to track your cycle so that you know what normal is for you. And it is as simple as tapping on it. Tap on the first day of your cycle. It will estimate, I think, normally 4 or 5 days. You can add as many days as you like. If you have the energy and the inclination to, then add lightness or heaviness of flow, cramps and mood swings, or whenever they pop up. And if you're able to give it as much attention and detail as possible, do so. But at the very basic level, track your days, and then you've got a record. If you know you are every 26 days on the nose, or if regular isn't something that happens for you. So then when you do reach later in life, and it's by no means the first symptom for many women, but when things are off, then you can recognize that something is going on. And again, that could be a myriad of things, particularly if for natural menopause, so again, we're excluding surgical menopause, then it could be stress, it could be undereating, it could be an illness, there could be so many reasons. But certainly when you're reaching, again, going for averages, your late 30s, early 40s and onwards, when you start noticing differences, then you can do a little bit more investigation. I know when I was in my 20s, I was not interested in looking after myself. I was far more interested in having fun. And now fun looks different to me now that I am 50. I can still have fun. It just doesn't mean being out all night and dancing on tabletops and whatever that might have looked like all the way back then. If you are so inclined, please exercise, please strength train. Even from a young age, this will stand you in really, really good stead. It will help your bone health, your muscle health, your brain health. So strength training. But if you are going to do one thing, just track what is normal for you.
Wow. That is so powerful and so doable too, because it's not complicated. You can do it for free
Mm-hmm.
or very low cost. So I really love this practical tip that everyone can do and just empower themselves to prepare for this time. Really love it. And what about young men?
Have conversations with your girlfriends. My eldest daughter is 17, and with her good friends, talking about their physical bodies, so periods, as far as what the girls are concerned, feels totally normal. And as a mother of a teenage girl who has friends who are mothers of teenage boys, sometimes the boys are offering to go down to the shop and buy sanitary products for their girlfriends, not even their girlfriends, but just a girl who's suddenly caught out in need at school or at work, whatever they're doing. And that's normal now. I still have a habit of hiding a tampon up my sleeve, particularly if I'm in a restaurant. If I need to go to if that's it, it goes up there because I can't walk through a room and everybody know nobody's looking, nobody cares. But the fact that the boys are just, they treat it as normal. So just talk to each other about what happens. I don't think teenagers are going to be interested in menopause. And why would they be? 20-year-olds as well. They're not going to be interested. But
Yeah.
if they track their cycle if they're a girl and talk to each other as human beings, then that's all you need to do at that age, certainly.
Wow. Yeah, that is so doable too. I love this. I love these practical tips. And I know that we're almost out of time, but I would really love to hear from you a little bit more about your podcast because I know we started talking about that. Love how that really started. And I want to know, what makes you such an inspiring host and maybe a little bit of why you love to do it.
It all goes back to the other people as well. Thank you for such a gorgeous question. The 100th episode went out this week. And so we did something a little bit different. And this beautiful woman, Lisa Stockman, she came all the way from Melbourne over to London. So we did a bit of a video. It doesn't work beautifully as a podcast, but it's a visual piece because she's a stylist. She'd been listening to the podcast since it began. And so we thought we would kind of celebrate together. So getting to tell the stories of these remarkable women. I've met people that I would never encounter in daily life. And I feel hugely privileged and often quite nervous, but hugely privileged to be able to have conversations with them. And they're all over the world. And people are listening all over the world. We went to Vietnam for our holiday in the summer, which was glorious, whole family. And I was able to stand there and go, there are people here who listen to real menopause talk. And then over in Senegal and in Canada and in Brazil and Colombia and or Philippines. It's so I'm very, very, very fortunate being able to tell stories. And I spoke to another woman, amazing author, who wrote some women's stories about postmenopausal life and freedom. And we both feel that the privilege is there. One of the women I spoke to also had the most beautiful phrase. And she said, there's a beautiful connection to self that happens in menopause. It acts like a portal to step up into what you're really capable of. This is it, helping you see where your strength really lies and how to access it. And also giving no Fs. And for me, that kind of sums up where life is going. And it's a good, positive thing. You settle into your wisdom, into yourself. You know yourself. You can be yourself and you can share that with others. And you keep your friendship circle tight because you know that those people want you for you, which I think is incredibly valuable as you get older. And those are the people I've been fortunate enough to meet through the podcast. So we will keep on going and we will keep on talking, sometimes in real life, person to person, which is a huge honor, and sometimes just talking over the airwaves.
Oh, I love that so much. So powerful. And one last thing. So we've been talking about, this perception or misconception and misperception about menopause and perimenopause. And hearing you say about like this beautiful connection that happens for people, what is possible? Like if you were to tell us, paint the other picture, not the picture that's in the media with the horrific things that you go through. What is possible for women when they educate themselves, when they know how to care for their body, when they know this awareness, when they listen to the podcast and hear these stories? What is the other side that we don't talk about?
Freedom and change. Everybody I've spoken to is working towards changing the perception and realizing that us as 50 plus, 60, 70 plus, we still have a lot to offer. We want people to realize that, whether they're observing us or they are us. Menopause used to be thought of as the change and the end in many ways, and it's not. It is just the beginning of feeling settled, which gives you freedom. And once you're no longer so concerned with other people's opinions, again, freedom. And when you have that freedom, you have more power because you're able to talk and advocate for change. So I very much hope that for everybody, the change is positive. The conversations mean they can feel good and it's positive, and that will give them the freedom to be and do whatever they want.
Yeah. Oh, that's what we all want. Absolutely. Living on purpose, authentically, intentionally, and free. And thank you for making that possible, for doing such great work, for empowering women with your own story, but also with so many stories that you curate for us to hear. Is there anything that you want to say to as some last words?
Oh, I'm sure there are so many because I could talk and talk and talk and talk too much. I think it really comes down to education. Educate yourself, advocate for yourself, and see where you can go, because there is no limit. I know it's something to be wary of you can do anything. Well, maybe you can, maybe you can't. But if you really put your mind to doing something you really want to and you really believe in, look after yourself. You are still young. You're young enough to do something that lights you up and gives you purpose, just like you said. I think that's so important. And if anybody wants to have a conversation, feel free to reach out.
Yeah, wonderful. And speaking of that, all of Hatty's handles, links, and all of that will be in the show notes, and you get to know more about her, and also a direct link to her podcast where you can find more inspiration and education about this topic. Thank you so much, Hattie, for being with us today. I'm deeply thankful for everything that you shared and for you just showing up as yourself and helping us see what's possible.
Well, thank you so much for the opportunity and the conversation. It's been a pleasure to meet you and talk with you. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. I will see you on the next Thought Leader podcast.
That's it for today's episode of the Thought Leader Podcast. Visit our Thought Leader Talks YouTube channel to browse all episodes and show notes and to continue the conversation. We love to hear your feedback, ideas, and success stories. And don't forget to subscribe for more expert information, insights, and inspiration. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time on the Thought Leader Podcast with another relevant conversation you don't want to miss.